What really happened at Roswell? Hello, I'm Gary Searman. This is Prophecy Watchers. Our guest today, L.A. Marzulli, and that question, what really happened at Roswell? You have made 2 films recently, and we're going to talk all about Roswell, right?
Looking forward to it, absolutely.
I look forward to it because you actually made a discovery, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
A little bit later.
Why UFOs? You've been pursuing this subject, and a lot of people say that's really not a biblical subject, but yes, it is. It really supplies a lot of missing information, and we need to know about it. I guess because we need to know about the enemy.
You know, the enemy is a master of lies and deception, but there's also a physicality to what he does. And I think part of the film, it's really on many different levels, but it exonerates the Marcel name. It shows that what crashed in Roswell was not a weather balloon. It talks and links us back into the supernatural world because something is going on here. And of course, the biblical reference to that is found in 2 Kings, where Elijah and his servant Gehazi are surrounded by the Syrian army. And Elijah says, open his eyes, Lord. He shoos them out of a tent, and Gehazi goes out there and he sees the chariots of fire. Remember, he's looking at something thousands of years ago, and he's not sure, there's nothing in his grid system, in his mind to, how do I describe this? He's never seen a flying vehicle. That doesn't exist on Earth as we know it until the 20th century. Yeah. So he's trying to incorporate something that he's seeing with his grid system, chariot and fire, and that's what he calls them, chariots of fire.
And it says that the horses and chariots of fire were round about Elisha.
Amazing.
In other words, they were
circles.
There were a lot of them.
So he got to see them.
He got to see the phenomenon close up. And it's the phenomenon that today goes under the rubric of flying saucers.
UAPs.
UAPs, and everybody is either wondering if they're real or knowing that they're real, what are they? I think everybody has some connection mentally with that phenomenon today, which tells me that we're very close to something big.
Something big, some sort of a revealing is about to happen. In fact, you could make a strong case that from 2017, we have been moving up what I call the rungs on the ladder of disclosure. And we're at the point now where David Grush, who's a whistleblower, he had no evidence per se, but he's in front of Congress. And Representative Mace asks him point blank, were there any occupants? And Grush looks right at her and says, yes, we have biologics. And then Mace follows up with a question. Well, were these biologics human or non-human? And again, he looks up like this, right at her, and says, non-human. And you would think that alone would get the phones ringing, people would be talking about it. It wasn't really picked up by the mainstream media in this country, but nevertheless, it's there, and it's out in the public discourse that our government has in its possession not only retrieve craft, but biologics. It's time for the church to come to grips with it. That's why we made the 2 films. These are not, and I'll use your favorite place, Epsilon Eridani. They're not friendly entities from Epsilon Eridani. They're from the second heaven.
Oh, yes. We went through a long period of naming constellations where they might have come from. 2 films, Exoneration and The Debris Field. And the 2 films go together very nicely. And the thrust here that L.A. is pursuing is biblical. L.A. is very much involved with Scripture, with the Bible prophecy, with reading Scripture, and has been for years. And now you have come to the point in your life, I think, where the Lord has led you to clarify what in the world is going on particularly for Christians, the Christian audience, but also for non-Christians. They need to know what these things are, because we believe that we're on the cusp of something very, very big happening.
And I think that something very big happening might be sooner than we all think. But the fact that something crashed way outside the little town of Roswell, and we know from the story that Jesse Marcel Sr., who was the 509th intelligence officer, went out. Mac Brazil was the rancher. So Brazil collects some of this wreckage that he's seen in what's known as the debris field, brings it back, shows the sheriff picks up the phone, calls the 509th bombing group, they dispatch Marcel. Marcel goes out with Mac Brazil, the rancher, and he picks up the wreckage. And he's looking at this stuff, and he's never seen anything like it. He goes back and wakes up his wife at 3 or 4 in the morning, and his son, Jesse Marcel Jr., who's 11 years old at the time. This is the backstory. This is the nexus of this whole event. And he shows them what the wreckage looks like. It's spread out on the kitchen floor and on the table, and he tells them, look at this, you'll probably never see anything like this again. It's from another world. And they're handling pieces of the wreckage, and they bring it back, and that's where we get the first headline that comes out. Army recovers flying saucer. And then 24 hours later, the story is redacted. What really happened? And in our first film, Exoneration, we interviewed Linda Marcel, Jesse Marcel Jr.'s widow. And it's the first time she's ever been on camera. We interviewed Denise Marcel, his daughter. We interviewed Dr. Richard O'Connor, who was Jesse Marcel Jr.'s best friend. Everybody comes on the record and proclaims loud and clear that the idea of a weather balloon was a cover story that was invented 24 hours later.
Actually, the cover story covered up something very big. There were bodies in that crash. Mm-hmm. And that became the subject of many conversations over the years. And this takes us out of the classical spiritual realm into something, that you can feel,
physicality
touch,
to it,
and experience. And I was looking at the Bible in Ephesians, where it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. It says here we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but I think that's referring to human flesh and blood. Right. Because there's flesh and blood in that wreckage, and it's not human.
It's not human. And another biblical text would be when Satan takes Jesus to a high point, basically into the temple, on one of the pinnacles of a temple, throw yourself down there. That's not demonic delusion.
Right.
That's physicality. He's moving Jesus from point A to point B, which opens up a whole can of worms, which we don't have time to get into. But there's physicality there, and there's also some sort of a transport system that takes Jesus from point A and brings him to the Temple Mount. Remember, he's out in the desert. So we're looking at something which is high strangeness, but it's there, and there's physicality. Jesus is on the literal temple on the pinnacle with Satan himself.
Now, you've spoken with some of Jesse Marcel's family, and that's included in the film. Mm-hmm. And what was that like?
Gary, there's 9 films in this series, and I'm working on 9, which you're part of. What is the truth? And we get into that from both sides of the aisle. But the bottom line is, the Marcel family were branded. They were branded from the get-go on this thing. How could Jesse Marcel Sr. mistake a weather balloon for a crashed UFO? And that story has been run and promulgated through the mainstream media over and over and over again. But the whole point of the film Exoneration, we believe that we've uncovered enough evidence, enough witnesses to prove that weather balloon story was a canard.
What does this mean to Christians? Church-going Christians, Bible-believing Christians. Why even study this subject?
Because what it's showing us is that there's a physicality to the supernatural world, that the coming great deception is upon us. And the springboard for that is the Darwinian paradigm, which is taught in all of our colleges. It's sacrosanct in academia and the scientific community, which basically states that the Christian worldview, there is no God. Jesus was just a good man. There is no supernatural. There's only mindless evolution. And that's what they believe. So the neo-Darwinists are looking, they're poised to figure out, they're embracing panspermia, the idea that we were seeded here by an advanced race of extraterrestrials. And that is the coming great deception.
From time to time, we feature articles on the Bible and the UFO phenomenon, and the magazine is The Prophecy Watcher. Here's how you can get your copy.
10 years ago, we began an exciting journey, a mission dedicated to spreading the good news of the soon return of Jesus. Our passion for teaching Bible prophecy is what drives us to warn the world of events that are soon to come. In the last 2 years, tens of thousands of prophecy watchers from all over the world have subscribed to our monthly magazine, The Prophecy Watcher. Our first Too Good to Be True offer came with 8 bonus DVDs. Our second offer came with 10 bonus DVDs. But our 10-year anniversary offer is even better. 12 DVDs on Bible prophecy can be yours when you subscribe to our 48-page full-color magazine for just 1 year, print or digital format, all for a gift of $50, with shipping included in the USA. Recent events have turned the world upside down. The COVID-19 pandemic was followed by Russia's war in Ukraine, all overshadowed by the horrific October 7th tragedy in Israel. The prophets of the Bible predicted a series of end-time wars, and we're seeing the final pieces of the puzzle fall into place. Russia, China, Iran, Syria, Turkey. The enemies of Israel are on the doorstep, just as the Bible predicted some 2,500 years ago. The Prophecy Watcher magazine includes the writings of dozens of prophecy experts like Gary Stearman, Mondo Gonzalez, L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salus, Josh Peck, and many others, writing on fascinating subjects like the Rapture, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Red Heifer, the World Economic Forum, the Global Reset, digital currency, the Mark of the Beast, the Nephilim, and the Antichrist's beast system of global control, things you will likely never hear about in church. 12 bonus DVDs will introduce you to Ezekiel's Gog and Magog war and the road to Armageddon. We'll examine the supernatural side of the Bible as we investigate controversial issues like the Nephilim, government UFO cover-ups, and the Shroud of Turin. We'll address the Luciferian Rebellion, a mutiny that changed heaven and earth forever. Speaking of heaven, you'll enjoy Mondo's glimpse into God's creation as he explores the stunning beauty of the stars and galaxies, seen through the lens of our Psalm 19 observatory cameras. 12 issues of the magazine, plus 12 bonus DVDs, a $180 value, now available for your gift of $50 to support our worldwide television outreach. Care to become a fellow Prophecy Watcher? Just visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. Partner with us today and help us take the message of the soon return of Jesus to the whole world.
And we're back. Hope you do subscribe to The Prophecy Watcher, because we talk about things that are just a little on the edge, I think, and you have to, because times are changing very rapidly. Very quickly. Now, let's talk about your trip to Roswell a little bit. You got inside Hangar 84, the famous Hangar 84, where purportedly they took the wreckage after they scooped it all up. But maybe they didn't scoop all of it up. Maybe they left just a little bit, and that's another story. But first, what was Hangar 84 like? Well,
we have learned, it's actually in the film, we've learned over the years that when we are at a site, we always pray up beforehand. We ask the Lord for favor, we get our armor on, and in we go. So we're at the outskirts of Hangar 84, and there's some guy who's on the other side of the fence. There's a fence all the way around it. He's smoking a cigarette. So yours truly, L.A. Marzulli, runs up to him and go, "Hey, we're a small film crew from California. Is there any chance we can get in?" And he goes, "Yeah, come on to the front gate." So we go to the front gate, the doors open up, we're all piled in there, and the assistant manager is on the phone with the head guy, whose nickname is Bull. And I'm talking to him on the phone, this is all on camera, and you see me go like this, because all of a sudden, Bull is coming down And then he gets there, and we're inside the conference room, and we're talking to Bull about all this stuff, and then he leads us into Hangar 84. It's the original hangar. And I'm just sitting there like a kid in a candy store. I can't even believe I'm actually there. Hangar 84 is where they brought the wreckage. How do we know? Multiple witnesses attest to that fact. There's also a room in the far back where allegedly the bodies were kept. Not the autopsy, but the bodies were kept back in that room. And here we are 76 years later in Hangar 84, and it looks exactly the way it did in 1947. So from there, we go to the debris field. We actually travel to the debris field, and what we find is astonishing.
Well, you know, when you say debris field, that part of the country is pretty desolate.
Very much so.
We're talking about rolling hills like an old John Wayne movie out there in the wild, wild west. And where do you start looking in a giant wide open field, which purportedly has been absolutely gone over with a fine-tooth comb, so there couldn't possibly be anything there, right?
There's a clip that's allegedly from the White Sands missile range. Whether or not it's real or not, we don't know. Obviously, it was leaked, and it shows what I believe is a real UFO, and it's coming down like this, and it kind of skims the ground and goes up again, and then as it comes up, and when it crashes, and this is all on film, we show this in the movie, and when it crashes, it explodes. And these shards of metal are like bullets. So it's not, there was a lot of debris on top of a debris field. We understand that. But a lot of it, and remember, in 47, metal detectors, no, they're not bringing metal detectors out there. Like bullets, they penetrated into the ground. So when we were out there, we had two gentlemen, Chuck Zukowski and Frank Kimbler, who are in the film with metal detectors. And on film, it's on film. We're the only Christian team that's ever done this. Not only were we out in the debris field, but we've got metal detectors, and on film, we actually show digging down, because we get a hit, and we're digging down like this, and we found two pieces of the wreckage. And they're very small. They're about almost a little bit larger than the nail on my pinky finger, just a slightly bit larger in the palm of our hand. And we show it all on film.
And you've had that metal closely examined by metallurgists who told you what?
It's an aluminum alloy that wasn't created till 1953. What is that doing out in a debris field? And that aluminum alloy, it's the metal that we discovered is closest to that aluminum alloy. It's 6000 series, but it's not an exact match. It's not an exact match. There's no alloy which matches what we got out of a debris field. And when you look at it under a scanning electron microscope, you can see microscopic, like when you shoot a bullet into a piece of wood and there's a round hole here and then it blows out, that's exactly what this metal looks like under a scanning electron microscope.
So it had been subjected to something explosive.
Very explosive on a micro level, also to high heat. This is what the metallurgists are saying, not only Marzulli. The metallurgists are saying something happened here, very traumatic to this metal. It was under pressure, it was under high amounts of heat, and something tore this stuff apart.
Now, the question of questions, what are we dealing with? And I'm asking this question as a Christian, with a Christian point of view about this world and where we're going and what time it is. And I know you have that same mindset. What does this mean? What you found, apparently validating the story. Of course, it doesn't need validating as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But you have added another aspect to the story. What does this mean to us?
It means that something crashed in Roswell decades ago. It was from another dimension, in my opinion, not another world. And, you know, people are always saying, well, how can they have physicality? Let me just back up before I make my point. We know right from the book of Genesis that when Adam and Eve leave the garden, there are two cherubim that guard the east gate only. Well, what about the north, south, and west gates? Well, for whatever reason, they don't need guarding, but the east gate does. And there's two cherubim there. And in between those two cherubim is what? A flaming sword which turns every which way. That is physicality. That is supernatural technology, which, is it a lightsaber? Sure sounds like a lightsaber to me, a flaming sword which turns every which way. So we as Christians, we need to understand that many of us have a very truncated view of what the supernatural is. I'll just give you one more. The New Jerusalem descends from heaven. The thing's 1,500 miles wide. And is it a pyramid? Is it a cube? We don't know. But there's physicality there. That's not delusion, because we're going to be living in that thing.
Yes, we are.
And it's unbelievable. How does it descend, and where does it descend from? The second heaven. What we are looking at is the coming great deception. What we are looking at is something that even Jesus warns us that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. That Satan comes with all signs and lying wonders. That men will faint from fear from what is coming upon the earth. And this is it. If it's not it, I'll shave my head and become a Buddhist. But the bottom line is, it is it. This is what we're seeing. Our government is rolling it out. When you've got David Grush telling us on the record that we've got biologics, we've got crash discs, and the Pentagon saying, there was a leak on the Pentagon, that we have discs which work. Bob Lazar talked about this in the 90s, it's all there. We only have a half an hour. We're just scratching the surface. But when you watch these two films, it'll educate the viewer as to what reality really is. That this was a setup, it was planned, and I could go on this for another 45 minutes, and we just don't have the time to do that. This is the tip of the iceberg to the coming great deception, because it's on its way.
Back to Ephesians and Paul, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. You really put that in context with what you have just said. We're not wrestling against human flesh.
Exactly.
We're wrestling against something non-human, and it's real, and it is evil. And it is the enemy.
Very nefarious.
And starting in the period, interestingly enough, just when Israel became a state.
Gee, what a coincidence.
I wonder if there's something there.
Absolutely there is. They go like this. Everything dovetails together.
Everything dovetails. Yeah. It's all part of prophecy that's leading up to a magnificent event, the catching away of the church. And you and I believe that can't be very far away.
I think it's close. That's all I'll say.
And things are happening very quickly. And by the way, LA is making them happen very quickly with his films. Let's pause, and here's how you can get your copy of LA's films.
If you're tuning in for the first time today, I'm sure you're intrigued by this fascinating conversation. We first met L.A. Marzulli 12 years ago, and we've been amazed as we've watched him explore some of the fringe subjects of the Bible, from the Nephilim to the Shroud of Turin and on to alien abductions, the cattle mutilation phenomenon, and the increasingly controversial UFO craze. L.A. has been on the trail of biblical truth. As you've heard today, this strange event took place in Roswell, New Mexico, over 75 years ago and created one of the greatest cover-ups in human history. But in the last few years, we seem to be getting closer to full disclosure. Talk show hosts, government insiders, military pilots, whistleblowers. It seems like the proverbial cat is out of the bag. Hollywood certainly has helped, turning cartoon characters into the world's new superheroes. But Christians know better. These so-called alien craft are just another effort by a fallen cherub named Lucifer to deceive the world. Imagine if one day millions of people disappeared and hundreds of gigantic spaceships appeared, telling Earth's inhabitants that they were one of our original creators. The Bible tells us that if it were possible, even the elect would be deceived. And since they have superpowers far beyond those of mortal men, who wouldn't believe them? LA has taken the Roswell investigation to a whole new level, interviewing people who know the real truth. He believes we are very close to the rapture of the church, along with full government disclosure on UFOs. Could these two events be connected? Believers in Jesus will be taken in the rapture, and suddenly the paradigm changes. As LA likes to say, when we go up, they show up. LA's two-part series, Revisiting Roswell, includes 2 DVDs, Evidence from the Debris Field and Exoneration. We're making them both available for your gift of $60 or more, with shipping included anywhere in the USA. Or for our international viewers, download them in our streaming store by visiting prophecywatchers.com. Call the toll-free number you see on your screen, or visit us at prophecywatchers.tv and ask for the Roswell Disclosure Package. We're also including a free bonus, a DVD by Gary and Mondo discussing a top-secret government project, Project Jehovah. You're going to hear some shocking information about alien technology and how our government has reverse engineered these top secret alien devices to change our world. How were Albert Einstein, Harry Truman, and Robert Oppenheimer all involved in the cover-up? The inside story is stranger than fiction. As Gary Stearman likes to say, Satan is very clever. As we draw closer to the end of this age, we all need to be on high alert, warning the world of things to come and the hope we have in Jesus. And keep looking up, not for UFOs, but for the return of our Savior. He is coming soon.
Well, we're back with L.A. Marzulli. Yeah, there is a propaganda battle afoot right now.
Absolutely.
And it's basically saying that people came from the stars and populated Earth. They came from, Epsilon Eridani is our favorite. They came from the stars and they came to Earth, and many, many things happened, and there was a great catastrophe. But they're back, and they're here to help mankind.
That's the ruse.
And it's a big lie.
Yeah, it's a big lie. And I also think that it'll happen after some sort of a nuclear event. And we don't have time to get into that, but that's what I think will happen.
Well, we've got a minute.
Well, I think there'll be a nuclear event on the planet, and that might trigger the rapture, and at the same time, as we're going up, they're coming down. And that will create the great deception. Remember, Jesus warns us that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. That is the most, in my opinion, one of the most terrifying verses in all the Bible. What is he talking about? He's talking about the coming great deception. He's talking about the UFO phenomena, in my opinion.
I think we need to be in prayer about what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. There is and the Bible uses the phrase strong delusion. And you speak about this all the time.
Yes, all the time.
There is a delusion afoot right now. And in about a half a minute, basically, what is that delusion?
That delusion is that we were created by so-called extraterrestrials and not the God of the Bible.
And people actually have come to believe that.
Many people, many good Christians.
There are television programs rolling
every Friday night
right now that are broadcasting that, it's got to be called a lie. L.A. Marzulli, it's always great to talk to L.A., and he's always on some kind of an adventure. I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are.